Nature's beauty can be deceiving, hiding dangers that strike when least expected. These encounters remind us that the wilderness, while breathtaking, is also unpredictable and deadly. In these 6 intense stories, survival comes down to quick thinking, bravery, and the will to overcome nature's fiercest challenges. Join us as we dive into tales where the peaceful wild turns into a battle for life. 5 close friends, all in their early 30s, embarked on a camping trip in the remote forests of northern Sweden. They had known each other since childhood in Stockholm and shared countless adventures, but this trip to Västerbotten County was special, a chance to escape daily pressures and reconnect in nature's serene beauty. The group included Eric, a software engineer with a passion for hiking and photography, his brother Lucas, a paramedic known for his survival skills, Sophia, an environmental scientist dedicated to protecting nature, Johan, a high school teacher who loved exploring new places, and Emma, a fitness trainer and the most adventurous of the group. They had meticulously planned the trip for months, eager to enjoy the tranquility of the Swedish wilderness. They set up camp near a crystal-clear lake deep in the forest, known for its towering trees, serene lakes, and abundant wildlife, including moose, deer, and the occasional bear. Confident in their outdoor abilities, they placed their tents in a circle around the campfire and took precautions to store their food securely, far from the tents. The first evening, they enjoyed freshly caught fish by the campfire, sharing stories and laughing as the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky turned indigo, and the stars twinkled above. The cool night air and sounds of the forest provided a soothing backdrop as they finished their meal, cleaned up meticulously, and retired to their tents. Unbeknownst to them, they had camped within the territory of a large, aggressive grizzly bear. Drawn by the scent of their dinner, the bear had been prowling the area, its instincts heightened by the unfamiliar human presence. As the friends drifted off to sleep, the bear silently closed in on the campsite. Around midnight, the bear attacked. Eric, closest to the camp's edge, was the first victim. The bear tore through his tent with terrifying speed, its powerful jaws clamping down on his torso before he could cry out. Eric's screams were brief, as the bear crushed his ribs and punctured his lungs. Lucas, in the tent next to Eric, woke up groggy and disoriented. Instinctively reaching for his survival knife, he barely had time to react before the bear swiped at him with its massive claws, ripping through the tent and slashing deep into his abdomen. The force knocked Lucas to the ground, and before he could defend himself, the bear was on top of him, ending his life almost instantly. The camp descended into chaos. Sophia, awakened by the sounds of violence, unzipped her tent and saw the hulking shape of the grizzly illuminated by the moonlight. She tried to scream, but terror froze her voice. The bear charged at her, knocking her to the ground before she could flee. Her last moments were a blur of pain and fear as the bear's powerful jaws crushed her skull. Johan, sleeping on the opposite side of the camp, was jolted awake by the sounds of his friends being slaughtered. He scrambled to his feet, panicked by the sight of the grizzly tearing through Sophia's tent. Johan turned to run, but the bear caught him with a swipe of its massive paw, knocking him to the ground. The bear's jaws found Johan's throat, silencing his cries for help. Emma, the last remaining camper, managed to crawl out of her tent and frantically tried to reach the safety of the trees. But the bear, in a predatory frenzy, was relentless. It caught up to Emma just as she reached the tree line, knocking her to the ground with its immense strength. Despite her desperate fight, the bear's sheer power overwhelmed her. The last thing she felt was the crushing pressure of the bear's jaws on her chest before darkness claimed her. In less than 3 minutes, the peaceful campsite had transformed into a scene of utter devastation. The bear, its instincts satisfied, wandered back into the forest, leaving behind a scene of horror. The tranquility of the Swedish wilderness had been shattered, and the lives of 5 close friends ended in a brutal, unexpected attack. The next morning, a group of hikers trekking through Västerbotten County stumbled upon the devastated campsite. The scene that greeted them was one of unimaginable horror. The once lively campsite was now eerily silent, with torn tents and scattered belongings lying amidst the signs of a violent struggle. The bodies of the 5 friends bore the marks of the bear's savage attack. The shocked hikers quickly alerted the authorities. Local law enforcement and wildlife officials arrived shortly afterward. News of the tragedy spread quickly through the small towns in the region, sending waves of shock and grief through the community. The friends who had ventured into the wilderness with dreams of adventure and camaraderie had met a fate no one could have anticipated. The forest, once a place of peace and beauty, now carried the weight of a tragic loss. The authorities launched an investigation into the attack, focusing on the behavior of the grizzly bear and the circumstances that led to such a rare and deadly encounter. Experts speculated that the bear, likely defending its territory or food source, had been unusually aggressive due to the scarcity of natural prey in the area. The incident served as a stark reminder of the unpredictable dangers that exist in the wild, even for those experienced and well-prepared. A group of experienced wildlife photographers set out on an expedition to Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, one of the most remote and pristine wilderness areas in the world. The group, composed of 4 photographers, each brought unique skills and a shared passion for capturing the beauty of nature. Their mission was to document the stunning Arctic landscapes and, if fortunate, photograph the elusive polar bears. Leading the group was Tom Reynolds, a seasoned photographer with over 20 years of experience. Tom had captured images of endangered species worldwide and was known for meticulous planning and prioritizing safety on expeditions. Sarah Collins, a rising star in nature photography, joined him. Sarah had gained recognition for her breathtaking images of Arctic wildlife, particularly seals and walruses. Her passion for the Arctic and her keen eye for detail made her a sought-after photographer. David Hunt, a veteran photographer with a background in documentary filmmaking, was also part of the team. David had spent much of his career in Africa, documenting big cats and other predators. His transition to Arctic wildlife photography had been seamless, and he quickly developed a deep fascination with polar bears. Lisa Morgan, a young and ambitious photographer known for her stunning images of birds in flight, rounded out the group. Despite being the newest member, her enthusiasm and talent were evident. The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge was a place of breathtaking beauty with vast, snow-covered tundra, towering mountains, and frozen rivers. The refuge was home to various wildlife, including caribou, Arctic foxes, and the majestic polar bear. The group knew capturing these animals would require skill, patience, and respect for the dangers of such a remote and unforgiving landscape. As they set up camp on the tundra, they were aware of the risks posed by the Arctic's top predator, the polar bear. These massive animals, awe-inspiring yet extremely dangerous, were particularly threatening when driven by hunger. The group had taken precautions, including setting up an electric fence around their camp and carrying flares and firearms for protection. However, they knew that nothing was guaranteed in the Arctic. The first few days of the expedition went smoothly, with the photographers capturing stunning images of the Arctic landscape and its inhabitants. The cold was intense, but the group was well prepared, and their experience allowed them to work efficiently in harsh conditions. As the sun dipped below the horizon each evening, the tundra was bathed in a soft, ethereal light that made for some of the most beautiful photographs they had ever taken. However, as days passed, the group felt they were being watched. The vastness of the Arctic, once a source of inspiration, began to feel oppressive, as if something lurked just out of sight. Their instincts were right. A large male polar bear had been stalking them from a distance, driven by hunger as the Arctic winter approached. The bear was closing in, slowly and methodically, biding its time before making its move. As evening set in, the Arctic tundra was cloaked in a deep, penetrating cold. The photographers gathered around their camp, reviewing the day's shots and discussing plans for the next morning. The mood was light, filled with a sense of accomplishment. But as darkness enveloped the landscape, an unsettling tension filled the air. Unbeknownst to them, the polar bear had closed the distance, its powerful instincts honing in on the camp. Driven by hunger and the scent of food, the bear had been watching the group for hours, its massive frame blending into the snowy backdrop. The electric fence offered little deterrence for such a determined predator. The bear's approach was silent, its large paws padding across the snow without a sound. As the photographers settled in for the night, the bear moved closer, its eyes fixed on the figures silhouetted against the faint glow of the campfire. Tom, the most experienced of the group, decided to check on some equipment near the perimeter. The bear saw its chance and moved with terrifying speed. In the dark, Tom barely had time to react before the bear was upon him. Its powerful jaws clamped down on his leg, the force nearly crushing the bone. The pain was immediate and intense as he struggled to free himself. The other photographers, startled by the commotion, turned to see the horrifying sight of the polar bear dragging Tom across the snow. Panic surged through the group as they scrambled for their flares and firearms. The bear's immense strength was evident as it pulled Tom farther away from the camp. Tom fought desperately, but the bear's grip was unrelenting. Sarah, David, and Lisa knew they had only moments to act. They grabbed their flare guns and fired into the air, the bright red lights illuminating the snowy landscape. The bear, momentarily startled, loosened its grip on Tom, giving him a brief chance to pull away. But the bear was not easily deterred. It growled, baring its massive teeth, ready to strike again. David fired a warning shot into the air, the loud crack echoing across the tundra. The sound, combined with the flares, finally caused the bear to retreat. It backed away slowly, its eyes still fixed on the group, before turning and lumbering off into the darkness. The photographers rushed to Tom's side, his leg badly injured and bleeding heavily. The attack had lasted only a few moments, but the damage was severe. The group quickly bandaged Tom's wounds and radioed for emergency help, knowing that it would take time for rescuers to arrive in such a remote location. The cold Arctic night felt even more hostile as they waited, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the bear's return. After what felt like hours, a helicopter arrived. Tom was airlifted to the nearest hospital in Fairbanks, Alaska, where he was taken into surgery. The doctors worked tirelessly to save his leg, and though the injuries were severe, Tom's life was no longer in danger. The attack left the group shaken, their excitement for the Arctic now overshadowed by the brutal reality of venturing into polar bear territory. The incident sparked discussions in the wildlife photography community about the need for even greater caution and preparation when working in such extreme and dangerous environments. Emily Sanders, a 28-year-old outdoor enthusiast, set out for her routine morning jog along the Appalachian Trail. Nature had always been Emily's sanctuary, a place where she could clear her mind and find peace amidst the wilderness. Growing up near Asheville, North Carolina, she had spent her childhood exploring the trails and forests of the Appalachian Mountains. Over the years, Emily developed a deep love for running, and the Appalachian Trail became her favorite route, offering a combination of challenging terrain and breathtaking views. Emily was aware of the trail's reputation for its diverse wildlife, including black bears. However, she, like many others, knew that bear encounters were rare, and most bears avoided human contact. Confident in her knowledge of the trail and the surrounding environment, Emily had never felt unsafe during her early morning runs. The serenity of the forest, with its towering trees and soft, rustling leaves, was a comforting companion on her daily journeys. On this particular morning, Emily was eager to start her run before the trail became crowded. The air was crisp, and the sun had just begun to rise, casting a golden hue over the landscape. The trail, damp from the morning dew, glistened in the soft light, and the forest was alive with the sounds of birds greeting the new day. Emily set a steady pace. Her footsteps were light and rhythmic as she ventured deeper into the woods. As she rounded a bend in the trail, Emily was suddenly jolted from her thoughts. Just a few yards ahead stood a large black bear, its dark fur blending almost seamlessly with the shadows of the trees. The bear was massive, easily over 300 pounds, and appeared startled by Emily's sudden appearance. For a moment, both Emily and the bear were frozen in place, each assessing the other. Emily's heart raced as she tried to remember what she had learned about bear encounters. She knew that running could trigger a predatory response, so she attempted to back away slowly, hoping to defuse the situation. However, the bear, feeling threatened by her presence and movement, decided to assert its dominance. With alarming speed, it charged at Emily, closing the distance between them in seconds. Emily's instincts told her to flee, but there was no time. The bear knocked her to the ground with a powerful swipe of its paw, sending a shock of pain through her body. Emily screamed in terror as the bear's claws tore into her skin, its sheer strength overwhelming her. The bear continued its attack, its weight pinning Emily to the ground as it mauled her with relentless force. Each strike from the bear's claws felt like a hammer blow, tearing through her clothing and into her flesh. Emily's screams echoed through the forest, a desperate cry for help in a place where she had always felt safe. The bear's powerful jaws snapped inches from her face, the sound of its heavy breathing filling the air as it asserted its dominance over what it perceived as a threat. Alone on the trail, Emily's world narrowed to the pain and fear that consumed her. She struggled to shield herself with her arms, but the bear's ferocity left her with little chance to defend herself. As the attack continued, Emily's strength began to wane, the reality of her situation sinking in. She was fighting for her life, and the bear showed no signs of stopping. In those terrifying moments, Emily's mind raced, her thoughts a blur of panic and desperation. The forest that had always been her refuge had turned against her, and the very trail she loved was now a battleground where her survival hung in the balance. As Emily lay on the ground, the black bear continued its relentless assault, each swipe of its claws pushing her closer to the brink of unconsciousness. The pain was excruciating, her body battered and bleeding from the powerful blows. Every attempt to move or defend herself was met with the bear's immense weight and ferocity, making her feel utterly helpless. The forest, once a place of peace, now felt like a trap, its dense trees and underbrush closing in around her. Emily's screams for help rang through the stillness of the early morning, carrying through the trees. Her cries reached a group of hikers who had set out on the trail a short distance away. The hikers, alerted by the desperate sounds, quickly realized the gravity of the situation. They knew that time was critical, and without hesitation, they raced toward the direction of the screams, their hearts pounding with fear and urgency. As they approached the scene, the hikers were horrified by the sight that greeted them. Emily was pinned beneath the bear, her body limp and bloodied from the attack. The bear, consumed by its aggression, showed no signs of backing down. The hikers knew they had to act fast if they were to save her life. Armed with bear spray, they cautiously advanced, knowing the risks involved in confronting such a powerful predator. One of the hikers, an experienced outdoorsman, took the lead, aiming the bear spray directly at the bear's face. With a quick motion, he unleashed a burst of the potent deterrent, the chemical mist filling the air. The bear, caught off guard by the sudden and overwhelming sensation, recoiled in pain and confusion. The spray burned its eyes and nose, disorienting the animal and causing it to release its grip on Emily. The bear growled in frustration, but the hikers continued to advance, forcing it to retreat further. After what felt like an eternity, the bear finally turned and lumbered away into the forest, leaving a trail of disturbed leaves and broken branches in its wake. The hikers rushed to Emily's side, her body still trembling from the ordeal. Her injuries were severe, with deep lacerations covering her arms, legs, and torso. She was barely conscious, her breathing shallow and labored. The hikers knew they had to get her help immediately if she was to survive. With great care, they lifted Emily onto a makeshift stretcher fashioned from branches and their jackets, and began the arduous task of carrying her back to the trailhead. The hike was long and difficult, but the hikers pushed on, driven by the need to get Emily to safety. Each step was a reminder of the fragility of life in the wild, and the group remained vigilant, their senses heightened by the fear that the bear might return. When they finally reached the trailhead, an ambulance was waiting, alerted by another hiker who had heard the commotion and called for help. Emily was quickly loaded into the vehicle and rushed to the nearest hospital in Asheville, where doctors immediately began treating her extensive injuries. In the aftermath of the attack, the incident sent shockwaves through the local community and beyond. Emily's story became a sobering reminder of the unpredictability of wildlife encounters, even in areas as familiar as the Appalachian Trail. The trail, once a place of solace and beauty, had shown its darker side, reminding everyone that nature in all its majesty could also be terrifyingly unforgiving. Tom Jenkins and Alex Martin, lifelong friends and avid outdoorsmen, set out on an adventure to the rugged wilderness of Canada's Yukon Territory. Both in their early 40s, they had grown up together in Vancouver, spending countless weekends exploring the outdoors, hiking, camping, and fishing. The Yukon, with its vast, untouched landscapes and abundant wildlife, had always been a dream destination for them. This trip was their chance to experience the thrill of fishing in one of the most remote and pristine environments on Earth. Tom, a seasoned angler with years of experience, was particularly excited about the opportunity to fish in the Yukon's renowned rivers. Known for its salmon runs, the area was a paradise for fishermen. Tom had spent weeks preparing for the trip, researching the best spots and gathering the necessary gear. Alex, equally passionate about the outdoors, was eager to join him. Although not as experienced in fishing as Tom, Alex brought with him a deep appreciation for nature and a strong bond of friendship that had endured for decades. The two friends chose a remote river deep within the Yukon Territory, far from the nearest town or road. As they set up camp along the riverbank, the sounds of the wilderness filled the air. The rushing water, the calls of distant birds, and the rustling of leaves in the wind created a symphony of nature that both men found deeply soothing. They spent their first day fishing, casting their lines into the cold, fast-moving waters, eager to catch the salmon that were plentiful during this time of year. The fishing was excellent, and the men were in high spirits, enjoying the peace and solitude of the Yukon. However, the beauty of the wilderness came with its own set of dangers. The Yukon was home to a significant population of grizzly bears, especially during the salmon run. These powerful animals were often drawn to the rivers, where they feasted on the abundant fish. Tom and Alex were aware of the risks and had taken precautions, keeping their food stored securely and making noise to avoid surprising any wildlife. But in the vastness of the wilderness, nothing was guaranteed. On the second day of their trip, Tom and Alex were completely absorbed in their fishing. The river was alive with activity, salmon darting through the water as they made their way upstream. The men, focused on their catch, failed to notice the movement on the opposite bank. A large grizzly bear, drawn by the scent of the fish, had emerged from the forest and was now watching them intently. The bear, a massive creature with thick brown fur and powerful muscles, stood motionless for a moment, assessing the situation. Its keen sense of smell had picked up the scent of the fish, and its instincts kicked in. With a sudden burst of speed, the bear charged across the river, the water splashing around its legs as it closed the distance between itself and the fisherman in a matter of seconds. Tom and Alex barely had time to react before the grizzly was upon them, its immense size and strength overwhelming them both. The wilderness, once a place of peace, had transformed into a scene of primal terror. The grizzly bear reached Tom first, its massive paws knocking him to the ground with a force that took his breath away. The impact sent a shock of pain through his body as he hit the rocky riverbank, barely able to comprehend what was happening. Before he could react, the bear was on him, its powerful jaws clamping down on his shoulder with crushing force. The pain was excruciating, and Tom's world narrowed to a blur of fear and agony as the bear mauled him, its claws tearing through his clothing and into his flesh. Alex, just a few feet away, watched in horror as his best friend was attacked. His mind raced, searching for something, anything to stop the bear. Instinctively, he grabbed his fishing rod, the only thing within reach, and began to strike at the bear, hoping to distract it long enough to give Tom a chance to escape. The bear, momentarily startled by the blows, released Tom and turned its attention to Alex. The grizzly's eyes locked onto Alex as it charged at him with terrifying speed. The fishing rod, flimsy against the bear's immense power, was no match for the oncoming attack. The bear swiped at Alex with its massive paw, knocking the rod out of his hands and sending him sprawling to the ground. Before he could get back up, the bear was upon him, its jaws clamping down on his leg and dragging him toward the river. Alex's screams echoed through the wilderness as the bear pulled him closer to the water's edge. The bear's teeth tore into his leg, the pain so intense it was almost paralyzing. Desperate to break free, Alex kicked at the bear with his free leg, struggling against the powerful animal that was determined to drag him into the river. The icy water splashed around them as the bear's relentless grip tightened, pulling Alex further into the current. Nearby campers, alerted by the commotion, rushed to the scene, their hearts pounding with fear. They could see the grizzly dragging Alex towards the river, and they knew they had to act quickly. One of the campers, experienced in the dangers of the wild, grabbed a gun from their campsite and aimed it at the bear. The others shouted and waved their arms, trying to scare the bear away. The bear, driven by hunger and instinct, was not easily deterred, but the combination of gunfire and the commotion eventually caused it to retreat. As the bear lumbered back into the forest, the campers rushed to Tom and Alex's side. Both men were severely injured, their bodies covered in deep wounds from the bear's claws and teeth. The pain was overwhelming, but they were alive. The campers quickly bandaged their wounds as best as they could, knowing that time was critical. The remote location meant that help would not arrive quickly, and the injuries were too severe to wait. The campers called for an airlift evacuation, and within an hour, a helicopter arrived to transport Tom and Alex to the nearest hospital in Whitehorse, the capital of Yukon. The medical team worked tirelessly to stabilize their condition during the flight, knowing that the severity of their injuries required immediate attention. Upon arrival at the hospital, both men were rushed into surgery, their survival hanging in the balance. The incident sparked renewed discussions about the importance of safety and preparedness when venturing into bear territory. For Tom and Alex, the fishing trip that was meant to be a peaceful escape had turned into a nightmare, one that they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. A team of 6 dedicated researchers embarked on a critical expedition deep into the Russian Arctic, one of the most remote and inhospitable places on Earth. Their mission was to study the rapidly changing environment driven by the urgent need to understand the impacts of climate change on this fragile ecosystem. Leading the team was Dr. Elena Volkov, a renowned climatologist with decades of experience in polar regions. Elena had devoted her life to understanding global warming, making her the natural leader of the expedition. Alongside her was Pavel Ivanov, a 35-year-old marine biologist passionate about the ocean and its inhabitants. Pavel's work focused on the effects of melting ice on marine life, particularly seals and fish, making his research vital in understanding how climate change was disrupting the Arctic food chain. The team also included Dr. Natalia Petrova, a geologist studying shifts in the Arctic's permafrost, and Dr. Andrei Smirnov, an expert in polar ecology. Rounding out the group were Sergei Volodin, a wildlife expert specializing in Arctic predators, and Anna Belova, a young researcher handling the expedition's logistics and technical challenges. Together, they formed a tight-knit, well-prepared team, ready to face the challenges ahead. The team established a research station on a large floating ice floe, far from any human habitation. The location provided direct access to the Arctic's dynamic environment, and the station was equipped with the latest technology. They took every precaution to ensure their safety, aware of the dangers posed by polar bears, especially as the animals became more desperate for food in the warming Arctic. The station was surrounded by barriers and alarms designed to deter polar bears, and the team had flares and firearms as a last resort. They were trained to respond to bear encounters and knew that vigilance was essential in this unpredictable environment. For the first few weeks, the expedition proceeded smoothly. The team collected valuable data on thinning ice and shifting marine life patterns, driven by the urgency of the rapidly warming Arctic. The endless daylight of the Arctic summer provided ample time to work, and the team grew closer as they shared their discoveries and discussed the implications of their research. However, as the days grew shorter and temperatures dropped, the risks increased. The team knew polar bears were more likely to approach human settlements as the ice receded and their traditional hunting grounds disappeared. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness began to creep across the ice, the team's worst fears were realized. A large male polar bear, driven by hunger and desperation, had been stalking the camp for hours, undetected, until it was too late. The bear, sensing an opportunity, slowly approached the perimeter of the research station, its massive form blending into the shadows. Suddenly, the alarms blared, shattering the quiet of the Arctic night. The team, startled by the noise, rushed to secure the camp, unaware that the bear had already breached their defenses. In the chaos that followed, Pavel, ever dedicated to his work, stepped outside to check on equipment near the camp's edge. The bear, now fully aware of the human's presence, made its move. With terrifying speed, it closed the distance between itself and Pavel, its powerful jaws clamping down on him before he could react. The researchers inside the station were oblivious to the imminent danger their friend faced just outside. As the alarms continued to blare, the researchers scrambled to understand what was happening. The noise was deafening, adding to the mounting panic. It wasn't until someone noticed that Pavel was missing that the true horror of the situation began to sink in. Realizing he had gone outside, the team rushed to a window, only to be met with a sight that would haunt them forever. Outside, the massive polar bear had Pavel in its powerful grip. The bear's jaws were locked around his torso, its sharp teeth sinking deep into his flesh. Pavel struggled, his body twisting in pain, but the bear's strength was overwhelming. With each movement, the bear tightened its hold, its claws raking across Pavel's body as it dragged him toward the edge of the ice floe. The cold, dark waters of the Arctic loomed just beyond, adding an even more terrifying element to the scene. Elena and the others grabbed the flares and guns, rushing out into the freezing night, their hearts pounding with fear and adrenaline. The bear, sensing the approaching threat, paused for a moment, its cold eyes locking onto the group of humans. But hunger and desperation drove the animal, and it was not easily deterred. Even as the flares were fired, the bear showed no signs of retreating. The bright bursts of light and the crack of gunfire echoed across the ice, but the bear's grip on Pavel remained unyielding. Pavel's cries of pain filled the air, mixing with the shouts of his colleagues as they desperately tried to save him. The bear, now enraged by the commotion, shook Pavel violently, the force of its movement sending shockwaves through his already battered body. The team continued to fire at the bear, their aim desperate and unsteady, knowing that they had only moments to act before it was too late. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a well-placed shot hit the bear, causing it to release Pavel and retreat. The animal staggered back, its massive frame casting long shadows in the dim Arctic light, before collapsing onto the ice a short distance away. The silence that followed was deafening, the only sound being the labored breathing of the team as they rushed to Pavel's side. Pavel was still alive, but barely. His body was covered in deep gashes, his clothing soaked with blood. The team worked quickly, their hands trembling as they applied pressure to his wounds, trying to stem the flow of blood. But the injuries were severe, and they knew that Pavel's chances of survival were slim. The cold Arctic air seemed even more bitter as they waited for help, the reality of their isolation sinking in. The team immediately radioed for an emergency airlift, knowing that time was of the essence. But in the remote reaches of the Russian Arctic, help was hours away. Pavel's breathing grew weaker with each passing minute, his life slipping away as the team huddled around him, offering what comfort they could. The sense of helplessness was overwhelming as they watched their friend and colleague fight for his life on the cold, unforgiving ice. When the helicopter finally arrived, Pavel was rushed to the nearest medical facility in Murmansk, but it was too late. The injuries were too severe, and he succumbed to his wounds shortly after arriving at the hospital. The team left to grapple with the loss of their friend, returned home with heavy hearts, their mission overshadowed by the tragedy that had unfolded. In the aftermath, the scientific community was shaken by the news of Pavel's death. The incident served as a grim reminder of the dangers that researchers face in the Arctic, where the risks of wildlife encounters are becoming increasingly severe due to the impacts of climate change. Brian Thompson, a 34-year-old outdoor enthusiast, set off for a solo camping trip in Colorado's Rocky Mountain National Park. Brian was no stranger to the wilderness. Growing up in Denver, he had spent much of his life exploring the mountains, forests, and rivers of Colorado. His love for nature had only deepened with time, and he often sought the solitude and peace that the wild places offered. This particular trip was meant to be a brief escape from the demands of his busy life, a chance to reconnect with the natural world and find solace in the beauty of the Rockies. Brian was well prepared for his journey. He had chosen a remote spot near a stream in a less traveled part of the park, far from the main trails and campsites. The location was ideal for someone seeking solitude, surrounded by towering pines and the constant, soothing sound of running water. Brian knew the risks of camping in bear country and had taken every precaution. He stored his food in bear-proof containers, kept his campsite clean, and followed all the recommended safety protocols. His tent was pitched away from the food storage area, and he made sure to cook his meals far from where he would sleep. To Brian, these were not just precautions, but habits ingrained from years of experience in the outdoors. The day passed peacefully as Brian hiked through the surrounding forest, taking in the vibrant fall colors and the crisp mountain air. He returned to his campsite in the early evening, exhausted but content. As the sun set behind the mountains, he settled in for the night, confident in the safety of his preparations. The cool night air and the distant hoot of an owl lulled him into a deep sleep, surrounded by the darkness of the wilderness. Unbeknownst to Brian, a large black bear had been wandering the area. This bear, possibly driven by hunger as the colder months approached, or perhaps habituated to human presence, had been attracted by the scent of Brian's campsite. Despite Brian's careful precautions, the bear's keen sense of smell led it to his tent, where it began to investigate. The bear-proof containers, designed to keep bears out, proved to be no match for this determined animal. With surprising ease, the bear managed to bypass the barriers and found its way to the tent where Brian was sleeping. The stillness of the night was shattered as the bear entered the tent. Startled awake, Brian found himself face to face with the massive animal, its dark eyes gleaming in the faint moonlight. Fear and adrenaline surged through him as he tried to fend off the intruder, but the bear was too powerful. It lunged at Brian, its claws tearing through the fabric of the tent and into his skin. The attack was swift and brutal, the bear's sheer strength overwhelming Brian's desperate attempts to fight back. The bear dragged Brian from his tent, its powerful jaws clamping down on him with a force that left him helpless. The sounds of the struggle echoed through the forest, reaching the ears of nearby campers who had been unaware of the danger lurking in the night. They immediately alerted the park rangers, who rushed to the scene, but the bear had already inflicted fatal injuries before they could arrive. The peaceful wilderness that Brian had sought had turned into a place of terror, the beauty of the Rockies overshadowed by the brutal reality of nature's dangers. As the park rangers rushed through the dense forest towards Brian's campsite, the sounds of the bear's attack still echoed in their ears, growing fainter as the bear dragged him further into the wilderness. The forest, normally so serene under the night sky, now felt ominous, every shadow concealing potential danger. The rangers moved as quickly as they could, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, but the distance and the rough terrain slowed their progress. Time was slipping away, and with it, the hope of reaching Brian in time. When they finally arrived at the scene, the aftermath of the attack was clear. The ground was disturbed, the soil torn up by the bear's claws, and traces of blood marked the path where Brian had been dragged from his tent. The rangers followed the trail deeper into the woods, their hearts heavy with the grim realization that they might already be too late. The thick underbrush and the uneven ground made their progress slow and difficult. Still, they pushed on, driven by their duty to protect the park's visitors, even in the face of such a horrifying situation. They found Brian a short distance away, lying motionless on the forest floor. The bear was nowhere in sight, having fled into the wilderness after the attack. The rangers quickly assessed Brian's condition, but it was clear that his injuries were too severe. The bear had inflicted fatal wounds, leaving Brian with little chance of survival, even if they had arrived sooner. The rangers could do nothing but cover him with a blanket, marking the end of a life that had been so deeply connected to the wilderness he loved. The rangers radioed back to the park headquarters, reporting the tragic outcome. Soon, more personnel arrived to secure the area and begin the process of tracking the bear. The decision was made to locate and euthanize the animal, both to prevent further attacks and to understand what might have driven the bear to such an unusual and aggressive behavior. The bear was eventually found and put down, but the action was taken with a heavy heart, knowing that this was a creature acting on instinct in a changing and challenging environment. The news of Brian's death sent shockwaves through the park community and beyond. He was well known among outdoor enthusiasts, and his tragic end served as a harsh reminder of the ever-present dangers in the wilderness, even for those who are experienced and prepared. The incident prompted an immediate review of safety protocols within Rocky Mountain National Park. Discussions about increasing safety measures, including more robust bear-proof containers and enhanced visitor education about the risks of camping in bear territory, were brought to the forefront.